Internal Revenue Service, IRS tax news. IRS debunks tax refund myths. IR 2020-161, July 16, 2020, Washington. With the July 15th tax deadline now passed, the Internal Revenue Service reminds all taxpayers that there is no secret way to find out when a refund will be issued. Most taxpayers have already filed their federal tax return, and many have already received their refund. Those that have not are understandably eager for details about when their refund will arrive. When it comes to tax refunds, a few common myths keep circulating and misinforming taxpayers. Some key facts can help people understand the refund process better. Taxpayers who file electronically and use direct deposit can expect their refund faster than those who mail a paper return, especially since the COVID-19 outbreak has reduced IRS staffing available to process paper returns. So they've been pushing this electronic returns for some time now. They've been doing it more, of course, with the COVID-19 due to social distancing, not having the staff in order to process the returns. But so it would take longer than if you have a paper return, typically, to process it for the refund. Taxpayers who file paper tax return are likely to face processing and refund delays. The best and easiest way to check on a refund is Where's My Refund? There's a link to that tool here. The Where's My Refund tool available on irs.gov and the IRS To Go mobile app. There's a link to the IRS To Go mobile app as well. A tax refund's status can be checked within 24 hours after the taxpayer receives the e-file acceptance notification. So if you file electronically, you should get an e-file notification on it. Then you can go and you could check the status of the refund. You want to check it maybe once a day if you're looking into it and you're concerned about it. More than once a day, probably not beneficial considering the fact that they only update it once a day, typically in the evening, as it's been told here. Where's My Refund is updated once a day, usually overnight. Processing delays for paper tax refunds. The IRS continues to process electronic and paper tax returns, issue refunds, and accept payments. The IRS is experiencing delays in processing paper tax returns due to limited staffing. This is causing refund delays. Taxpayers who have already filed a paper return should know that the IRS is processing paper returns in the order in which they are received. In addition, interest and individual 2019 refunds reflected on returns filed by July 15, 2020 will generally be paid from April 15, 2020 until the date of the refund. Interest payments may be received separately from the refund and are considered taxable income in the year received. So you have interest income from the IRS. That's going to be taxable income typically for the interest income. Taxpayers who filed a paper return should not file the same tax return again or call the IRS. So if you filed a paper return, you might say, hey, well, maybe I'll just refile it and I'll just e-file it now or I'll send it in again. Maybe that'll help them because it's kind of taking a long time over there. But that's probably just going to confuse them further and might actually delay the process further. And they should, according to what they're saying here, they process the returns as they come due. So it's first come, first served. So if you send in another paper return, then obviously that wouldn't get to the front of the line, you would think, given what they're saying. Their system is first in, first serve on terms of the paper returns. But of course, the processing of the electronic returns are going to be done faster. But again, you don't want to send in two returns because if you confuse the IRS, then that's not a good thing for you most of the time, unless you want delays to happen. Back to the text. Common myths about tax refunds include getting a refund this year means that there's no need to adjust withholdings for 2020. So this year means 2019, right? It's kind of late here for the tax filing here, but remember that the filing date was for 2019, the prior year. And so just because you got a refund doesn't necessarily mean that your withholdings are perfect for 2020, which you're going to be filing for in 2021, tax year 2020, filing for it on the tax return in 2021. To help avoid a possible surprise next year, taxpayers should look to make changes now. Adjusting tax withholding with an employer can help ensure that neither too much nor too little tax withheld from an employee's paycheck. The tax withholding estimator helps taxpayers figure out the right amount. There's a link to that tool here. It is a nice tool to have. It's basically a projection tool that you can put a projection in and then think about what your withholdings need to be. Remember, if you get a big refund in 2019, that's probably not exactly ideal either, because you'd rather have the money, each paycheck typically, and have a small refund. In an ideal world, perfect world, you'd want an information return, no refund, no amount due. You just process the return, and it would be an information return for the taxes you already paid during the year. In this case, in 2019. For next year, obviously this year, 2020, you'll be filing 2021. You can't do that, though, because federal income taxes are too complex, and therefore you shoot for a small refund in order to avoid penalties and interest that could result if you miss the target, and then and you're too low, right? Because then they're going to charge penalties and interest on you. So what you do is you want to use this tool. It's a projection kind of tool, and if you have more complex kind of tax systems or tax settings, if you have multiple people working in the same household, dependents changing, or things like that, then you want to take a look, and you might have to adjust this. Also note that when you adjust it, if you find that you need to adjust the taxes, the withholdings this year, if you do it now, it's the middle of the year, so you're going to have to make a more extreme adjustment in your withholdings now in order to cover the amount that will be due. And then next year in January, you'll have to fix it again so that you can lower it back to what it needs to be for the entire year, so that the withholdings will be working itself out. And again, this tool is a pretty good tool to help you do that. You can also do what-if scenarios with it too, just kind of like a projection tool with it as well. Back to the text. Calling the IRS or tax professionals will provide a better refund date. Contacting the IRS or tax professionals will not expedite a refund. IRS assistors and tax professionals cannot move up a refund date, nor do they have access to any, quote, special, end quote, information that will provide a more accurate refund date. So you can't, if someone prepares your tax return, they're not going to be able to contact the IRS and say, hey, can you process that a little bit further? I got some pull over here as a tax professional. Not going to happen typically, unless you got someone that's really connected on the tax profession, but that's not going to happen. And if you call the IRS and try to say, hey, look, can you push up the date? I really kind of need the money now. Not going to happen, because they have a policy in terms of their bureaucratic system, which will typically be the first come, first serve, first in, first out type of process. That will differ somewhat, of course, again, on the filing type, if it's electronically filed versus if it's paper filed, but they're going to try to stick to that system, and you're not really going to be able to jump. You're not going to be able to jump in line on the system and move your return up or anything like that by calling them or trying to get your accountant to call them. Back to the text. Ordering a tax transcript is a secret way to get a refund date. Ordering a tax transcript will not help taxpayers find out when they will get their refund, and it does not accelerate the issue date of the refund. So I guess the idea there was that if you order a transcript before the tax return was processed or something, maybe it'll get them to speed up, because now they got something they got to ship. I don't know exactly what the reasoning is, but apparently that came out that transcripts would somehow help out with the refund date, but it doesn't seem to be the case. It's not the case, is what they're saying here. Back to the text. The Where's My Refund tool is wrong because there's no deposit date yet. When Where's My Refund, there's a link to Where's My Refund, shows the date return status is received, it means that we have received the tax return and are processing it. Some returns may take longer to process than others and needs further review. This includes when a return includes errors, is incomplete, is affected by identity theft or fraud, includes a Form 8379 injured spouse allocation, which could take up to 14 weeks to process. Taxpayers will be contacted by mail if the IRS needs more information to process a tax return. People waiting for a refund in the mail should plan for the additional time a check takes to arrive. So when you look and they say, hey, we've gotten the return, that just means that they've gotten it, they haven't processed it. That's good news to you, because that means that they've gotten it, and you shouldn't have any late filing kind of problems with it. It doesn't mean that they've processed it, therefore it doesn't mean that they haven't found any problems with it. Once they process it, they might have some problem with it, which could delay the refund, and then they're going to ask you about the problem typically. But the good news is, again, it should avoid, if they've received it, it should avoid penalties and interest. It doesn't necessarily have anything to do with when the actual refund's going to go out, because there could be a problem again with the return. And if there is, then of course that will throw a wrench into the system, slowing the system down, making it longer for the refund to happen, and possibly causing the IRS to ask you questions about the return. Back to the text. Something is wrong when the refund amount is less than expected. There are a lot of reasons that cause a tax refund to be different than expected. Situations that could decrease a refund include taxpayer math errors or mistakes. Obviously, there could be a mistake on the return, just a math error. IRS will typically fix it. And if it's a small kind of error, they'll basically make an adjustment, usually send you the refund as well as a letter with it, telling you the math correction that they did, and then giving you the opportunity generally to see if you want to counter that argument, to see if they're wrong, if your return was right. So owing federal or state taxes, child support, student loans, or other federal non-tax obligations. So if you owe federal taxes in some other tax year, then the IRS will apply that out. If you owe state taxes, the IRS doesn't typically always talk to the states, but sometimes they do, in terms of if you owe the state money, then the refund may find its way to the state. Child support, same thing. You might have some other federal type of federal obligations, which the IRS will just take your refund and pay off for you, do you the favor of paying them for you instead of giving you the refund. So a portion of the refund is held while the IRS reviews an item claimed on the return. So they might say, hey, we're going to give you part of the refund right now, but they got this one item that we're questioning right now, and we're not going to give you the refund related to that one item or the tax effect on it until we clarify that we agree with that item. The IRS will mail a letter of explanation if the adjustments are made. Some taxpayers may also receive a letter from the Department of Treasury Bureau of Fiscal Service if their refund was reduced to offset certain financial obligation. Taxpayers can call the IRS automated refund hotline at 800-829-1954, which uses the same information as Where's My Refund. There is no need to call the IRS unless Where's My Refund says to do so.